2023. We got the recording going, so thank you for getting that up. We're meeting today, just for the record, entirely virtually, so thank you to everybody who's gathered here. Jordan just entered the agenda in the chat, so if anyone would like to pull up a copy of that, feel free to do that. Thank you, Jordan, for adding that. I'm going to go ahead and just start reading through our roll here, and yeah, if folks sign on later, they can just maybe introduce themselves through the chat. So, do we have anybody from Alta? And I'll just remind folks, if you are on here from, one of the communities that's called, if you'll just unmute and kind of signify your presence for the record, that's great. How about Bluffdale?
Yeah, Grant from Bluffdale. Thanks.
Thanks, Grant. Welcome. Brighton?
Hi, Kayla here with Brighton.
Hey, Kayla. Thanks for being here. Copperton.
Also me.
You are representing many today. We are extra grateful you're here. For Cottonwood Heights, I'm here. I'm Samantha DeSilhorst. And then I believe we also have Mike Johnson from Cottonwood Heights.
Here.
Let's see which of my coworkers also showed up and which are going to get a stern talking to after this meeting. Might just be the two of us today. How about Draper?
Todd Taylor from Draper.
Hey, Todd. Thanks for being here.
I'm Scott Cooley with Draper City.
Welcome, Scott. Emigration Canyon.
Kayla again.
Thanks, Kayla. Harriman.
Michael Moy, Planning Director.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for being here. Perfect. How about Holiday?
Hi, this is Jared.
Hey, Jared. Thanks. Good morning. Currents.
Kayla.
Hey, Kayla. Magna.
Yep.
I should probably just make a note that if you're here, we're covered.
Maybe it's just MSD as a category. That would be easier.
That's probably a good idea. I'll make a note for that. That's fun. How about Mill Creek? Okay. Murray. Riverton. Okay, Salt Lake City. How about Salt Lake County?
Rogers here from Salt Lake County.
Hey, David, thanks for joining us. Let's see, Sandy. Okay, South Jordan.
David Mann here.
Hey, David. Thank you. How about South Salt Lake City? Okay, Taylorsville. West Jordan.
Larry Gardner.
Our favorite Larry Gardner. Hi,
Larry Gardner. Oh, yeah.
Welcome. Thanks so much for being here, and thanks again for hosting our meeting in September. That was great to see you guys in person. West Valley City.
Good morning, everybody. Steve Pastrick here.
We are very glad Steve is here because he's going to be sharing some updates on what's going on in West Valley. So good morning, Steve. Thanks for joining. How about White City?
Yes.
Thank you. UDOT. Okay, and then UTA. I know we've got some folks from UTA. If you want to introduce yourselves.
Michelle Larson.
Preston Larson here, UTA.
Great.
And I'm here, UTA. So.
Oh, thank you so much. And it looks like I skipped over Midvale, so let's jump back to that.
Cody Hill here from Midvale.
Thank you. All right. And let's see, Federal
Gwendolyn.
Highways, FHWA.
Gwendolyn's here also, I think, as my.
Yes, he is. He
Yes.
messaged me to kindly inform me. I forgot Midvale, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, and then WFRC, I'm not sure if you guys want to introduce yourselves, or if Jory, if you want to read out staff from your end, however you want to do that.
I can go through our list. We've got a pretty good chunk here. So our Deputy Director, Ted Knowlton, is here. Julie Bjornstad, Hugh Van Wagenen, Lauren Victor, Seamus Gueda, Andrea Pearson, Jordan Chandler, Miranda Jones Cox, and myself, Jory Donner. Andrew Gruber also looks like he's joined as well. And then there's been Sarah Lawless.
Awesome. Thank you, WFRC, and thanks to all your staff for all the work you do to make these meetings possible. Okay, and then I'm going to read out a few of the additional groups that we sometimes have on the calls, and then I'll just open it up. I'm sure I missed other people, so we'll open it up for that. Do we have any representatives today from Jordan School District? How about Envision Utah? Okay, what about Avenue Consultants?
Hey, Samantha. I'm here from Avenue. But by the way, I think Brittany joined us from Sandy too. So sometimes it's always nice to ask if anybody checks in after you call their city.
Yeah, for sure. We'll hit that at the end. I'm sure that we've got folks still signing on. So appreciate you being here, Thomas. Thank you. WCG. How about Bike Utah? And SOMIS. Trying to give everyone a chance to. All right, who did I miss? If anybody wants to unmute and state who they're with, I know we had a few folks sign on as I was reading out, or if you want to add your name and community in the chat box for the record, that's great too. All right, hopefully we've given everybody a chance to do that. Thanks again for being here. Let's move right into the second part of item 1, which is our consent agenda. On today's consent agenda, we just have one item. It's the approval of minutes from our September 13th, 2023 meeting. So ready for a motion, entertain a motion to approve that consent agenda if anybody is willing to make that.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, the motion from Larry. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, and a second, I think, from Mike Johnson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Great. Motion approved, or I guess we should probably do all in favor of the motion.
Aye.
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 Opposed, if any? Okay, motion approved. Minutes stand as approved for September 13th, 2023. Great. So now that we've got sort of the admin stuff taken care of, let's go ahead and open up item 2. This is a local community highlight from West Valley City. We've got Steve here today to share a little bit of a spotlight on the work that's being done there. So Steve, I'll just turn it over to you, and I think you should have the ability to share your screen if you want to do any slides to accompany your update.
Great, thanks, Samantha. And before I get started, I'll just put out a congrats to Ted on his election win. So congrats, Ted.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Let's see. All right, can everyone see my slides okay?
Yeah, we're seeing the presenter view, or the full view of it. Looks good.
Perfect. So I think most folks know that West Valley is the second largest in population. What many may not know is we're also second largest in employment. Now, granted, we're a distant second. So I didn't put Salt Lake City on here because they would dwarf everyone else. There are about 300,000 jobs. But just wanted to point out here that West Valley does have the second largest employment in the state, and of course in the county as well. This next slide I think is pretty interesting. It shows, it's from the census, what percentage of the population in a city also works in that city, right? So here again, Salt Lake City wins on this comparison. They're almost 50%. But I think it's interesting. Cities like Draper and West Valley are just over 14%. So obviously, the more jobs you have in your community, the more likely people are to live and work in your community. So, so kudos to those that are getting more jobs in their city. So I wanted to now just shift and talk a little about specifically about what's been happening in West Valley. It's maybe not as well known. So I've got two aerial images here. The one on the top is from 2013. The one on the bottom is earlier this year. Just to orient everybody, you've got on the left, you got 7200 West at the top, SR 201 on the right, Bangerter Highway. And what we've seen a tremendous amount of is light industrial type development. In fact, over those 10 years, we've seen about 6.5 million square feet of industrial. Now, that's not as splashy as stuff at the point of the mountain, but hey, it pays the bills. And so that's something that I think West Valley has done really well at as far as attracting industrial development. You can just kind of see some of these larger buildings, some of them almost 800,000 square feet of, again, distribution and warehouse space. So that's one thing we have done a lot of over the last several years. Another little tidbit, there is still room for us to grow on the industrial front. So what you're looking at is kind of the southwest portion of the city. And something that happened fairly recently is there's a land swap between Northrop Grumman, who used to be ATK, so the defense contractor, and Kennecott. And so the land in blue was previously owned by Northrop Grumman and now is under Kennecott's ownership, and Kennecott is working on development plans for that area in blue. So just to put it in perspective, it's about 1,000 acres. So we do see primarily industrial opportunity, given that it's next to Northrop Grumman and Hexcel, so other industrial users. So lots going on the industrial front in the city. Then shifting to residential, just wanted to highlight some of the residential projects we have that are either entitled and not yet started construction, or also projects that are under construction right now. So here's this will be the most dense project we'll have in the city. So over 100 units per acre that would be just not too far from City Hall by our basically our bus hub and light rail end of the line light rail station. This is another large apartment project that's over by the Maverick Center. So also this is literally right next to the track station. You could reach out and touch it from from this site. Here's another one that's over by the Valley Fair Mall, so right next to Costco. This one's under construction. Another one that's this was actually a previously, or was previously a Kmart site. So we have both commercial and some for us higher density residential going in on that site. And shifting to townhomes, it's interesting. This product looks like all townhomes, and some of them are just townhome units. The other ones on the bottom are actually stacked flat, so they look like townhomes, but they're actually one unit on the bottom and another unit on the upstairs. So then more traditional type townhomes, we've got quite a few going on in the city with a variety of density and 2 to 3 story. We're seeing 3 stories become more common, just again with land prices. A lot of product now having rooftop decks is another thing that's becoming more common. Here's a couple of again more traditional, more modern units we're getting. Again, a couple more projects that are being built in a couple different spots in the city. And again, you can see densities ranging from like 10 to 16 units to the acre on the townhomes. So just to wrap up here, I wanted to point out kind of the city's strategy when it comes to multifamily. So this map and stolen from UTA here is, shows all the bus routes and as well as the TRAX line that serves West Valley City. And those 11 projects I just showed you are highlighted here with those red stars, okay? And so first of all, of those 11 projects, 7 of them were redevelopment projects. So I think that's significant. But also every one of them is either by a track station or on a major thoroughfare like Redwood Road, 35th South, 5600 West, and all of those locations have transit access. And again, that was very much intentional. So we're trying to really steer density to those locations, and I feel like we've been successful at that. So there's the hopefully not too lengthy update on West Valley City, and thanks for the opportunity.
You have so much going on. That is amazing to me. Thinking about like the projects I've permitted over the past couple of years, I'm like amazed that you even have time to be here, Steve, because there's so much going on out there. I had a few questions that came to mind, and then I'll open it up if anyone else, has questions for you. One of my questions was, with having some industrial uses in part of the city, is that something that you still find is pretty well supported by the constituency, or is there any pushback on more industrialization where you're having people be like, no, we'd rather, have it be used for XYZ instead?
We have not had pushback on that, and really it's because we've really tried to keep the majority of the industrial along the 201 corridor, right, where you would kind of expect that. I mean, there's a lot of that in Salt Lake City on the north side of 201 as well.
Right.
So we try to really kind of keep that in that lane, so to speak, on the north portion of the city, where generally speaking, there's kind of a buffer, if you will, between that and residential use.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In a similar kind of way, I also was wondering about the sort of public sentiment around adding some more density in housing. It seems like you guys are doing such a great job of kind of strategically adding density near station areas, and doing it, seeing it in creative ways of that product where it's actually 2 units, but it reads form-wise as just a townhome. Is that something that you like I kind of deal with, have pushback from the community on, or have they been pretty supportive of adding some strategic density throughout those corridors?
Great question. Depends on the location. So for example, here in what we call Fairborn Station, by City Hall, we've planned for density here for a long time. So there's really been very little pushback, just because it's known that that's the plan. Now, where we did get significant pushback was on the Kmart side, right? So that borders Taylorsville, and so we had residents from both the city or West Valley and that they opposed that. But in the end, I mean, the situation we were facing there is you either do a mixed use project like we did, or you get the 30-year lease on a karate superstore, right? I'm being facetious, but basically it's, you could have some not great tenant just basically leasing that for another 30 years, and it just continues to sort of run into the ground. And the interesting thing, if you compare just from a fiscal perspective, what the Kmart was doing in business compared to what the city will see in revenue from this project, it's pretty significant upside, even though with residential, you get that haircut on property tax, right? Even
right.
You're still seeing a lot more revenue from that. So
that's always such an interesting and compelling comparison when you can look at the tax revenue. And I think it is counterintuitive for a lot of folks that a mixed use project can outperform a large commercial tenant in tax revenue. So I think that's really helpful data to sort of remind all of us to tap into, that can be a very compelling comparison to share throughout the entitlement process. And and certainly inspirational to hear from you that, you know, it works to put stuff on a plan and plan for it and then point to that and say, hey, density has always been anticipated at this site. That makes me feel better about these long range plans we're doing with hopes that it helps something in the future. Great update. Does anybody else on the call have questions? I see Julie's got her hand up. So I'll just kind of open it up for questions for Steve.
Yeah, so you mentioned that like all of the properties that you just showed are either near transit or a major corridor like Redwood. And so my question is, what is either the developer asked to do or what is the city doing to help facilitate either those people's movements to the transit, or like when we start building higher density on roads like Redwood? I know there's been a lot of study there, but when we start building, you know, there's a lot of talk about putting density on these high capacity roadways, but those high capacity roadways aren't planned for more pedestrian and bicycle activity. So I'm just trying to figure out like how we can, as we densify and as we put more residents on these non-walkable roads, what either the developer is doing or the city is doing to kind of facilitate that change and use along the road.
Yeah, great question. So on Redwood Road, it's been a painfully slow process, but one of the things we did is changed our streetscape standards so that as new development happens, we put in a wider park strip and a wider sidewalk along Redwood. And so right now in West Valley, about 20% of the street has been redone in that. But again, it's kind of a slow going process as things turn over. So so that's one way. Again, I know it's kind of a piecemeal approach, but it's done as development occurs, just because the city doesn't have the means to just like wholesale go and do that ourselves. So at least that's one way we've tried to address that. And then also just looking at trying to have the higher density locations be more on intersections. So for example, with the example I showed was on 4100 South and Redwood, which actually is kind of the intersection of two transit options. So I don't know if that partially answers your question, Julie, but those are a couple.
No, that answers my question. And then after I asked the question, I saw Ted's face and I realized he probably is thinking, why isn't she mentioning the great streets work we just wrapped up that can help communities do this exact thing that she's asking about? So let's just go ahead and plug that we have a new resource, the Wasatch Choice Great Streets, which is kind of a guide to have these conversations, Steve, that your city is facing now as our communities are changing. How can we match up land use and transportation? And you know, what ways can the city and UDOT and UTA and others think about that process? Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks for your answers, Steve. One more, I'll just do kind of one more call if anyone has questions for Steve. Flip through the little tiles here and see if I catch anyone unmuting.
Steve, I'm curious, for some of these redevelopment projects, in all those cases, did West Valley City purchase the land, or did you have property owners that came forward that wanted to work with you guys? How did you kind of negotiate that?
Yeah, so on the examples that I showed, none of those actually involved the city acquiring property. So we do have examples that have been completed where the city did, for example, other projects within Fairborn Station where the city acquired property and worked with it, you know, selected a developer and there was tax increment involved, all of that. But on the examples, the redevelopment examples I showed, it was just the developer going in. And in some cases, there wasn't a whole lot on the property to begin with. So it was, I would say it was sort of a lighter redevelopment, right? Some older homes on a major street that were bulldozed.
Okay.
But yeah, but none of these had that level of participation from the city in terms of land acquisition.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Bendalina, I saw that you had your hand up. Do you have a question as well?
Yes, just a quick question. I was wondering, with the industrial development in West Valley City that has come up around 201, if the topic of air quality has ever come up within the West Valley context, since you know that part of the county is sort of one that has a higher incidence of bad air quality than other parts.
Yeah, it has not come up. But in terms of just like, again, strategically where you would put industrial, where you had a lot of truck traffic, I mean, being sort of at the crossroads of Bangerter, 201, Mountain View corridor. I mean, again, I'm not sure of a better place to put industrial than at the crossroads of those kinds of facilities.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think it's interesting too to look at the other half of your presentation you shared with a lot of station area planning and think about the positive air quality impact that that type of planning would have for encouraging folks to use transit. So it seems like West Valley City is very well rounded with its approaches there. Okay, final call. Does anyone have any other questions for this great conversation?
I'm curious as to whether any of the housing is affordable. Is it any of it affordable housing? Is it any of it being subsidized to support affordable housing?
Great question. So generally speaking, apartments in West Valley City are just meaning market rate apartments tend to be affordable to those that are making 80% of the area median income. So if you look at just rents regionally, we tend to be on the lower end of the spectrum for rents. And I'm talking market rate rents, right? So not subsidized. So just by the city doing new rental product, generally speaking, and we have some exceptions, but generally new rental product would be affordable, again, for stacked flats. For townhomes, that if it's a rental townhome, that starts to get outside of that 80% range. So maybe to restate that, not affordable in terms of like income restricted affordable, but affordable just by the fact of our market rate rental product tends to generally be affordable.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve, for sharing such a great highlight of your community. It sparked, I think, a very robust conversation, which is great on these calls to hear the questions we have. And I'm always amazed at the similarities between communities. So really appreciate you being here. We hope you'll stay on for the rest of the call, but you have done your duty. And if you need to move on with the rest of your day, we're grateful that you were here. All right. I'm going to move us right into item 3, which is kind of a multi-pronged discussion from our friends at WFRC about, broadly speaking, the Wasatch Choice vision. I think we can start off with talking about, I think, the Beehive Bikeways, maybe with Hugh. Hugh, if you'd take us through that, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you so much. And, thanks to everybody that was able to come out and participate in our workshops with us, where we talked about this idea of a family-friendly bicycle network, and images that you see up here, right, or some of the ones that we presented in that meeting, just to talk about, providing real choice for folks to get around, and they need to be in a low stress environment, someplace where they feel safe and protected from vehicular traffic, and feel good, be able to get out there and not be stressed as they move around. So we had you mark up all these maps. I'm just going to give you show you what we heard, or what was drawn in this area here moving forward. So again, we're talking about the Utah Trail Network and Beehive Bikeways, sort of collectively. Utah Trail Network being a specific UDOT program, Beehive Bikeway something that we're working on and hopefully giving a lot of resources here in the future to essentially create one big network, right? It doesn't really matter to the user if it's UDOT owned necessarily or locally owned or whatever. They just want to get around. So on this Utah Trail Network, those were the blue markers, if you recall. And this is what got marked up collectively through all our workshops in the Salt Lake, West Valley urbanized area. And so there's a lot of interest here, and a lot of folks, right, that want, things to be considered for the Utah Trail Network and for UDOT to take over and maintain. Just as a reminder, the little yellow dots, those are the gold stars that we asked you to put on for projects that are closer to shovel ready than others. And then we had the green network, right? That Beehive Bikeway network, or other routes that should be looked at to see if they could be upgraded to family friendly. And this is what this looked like. when we pulled all that out. So again, pretty comprehensive and a lot of stuff going on in this space as well. And if you put them both together, right, it's a lot there, a lot for us to consider and pull out and continue to working with you all on. But one thing it really just screams to me overall is there's interest in this and there's demand for this and people want to make this happen, right? Back to what Steve was working on with, putting dense housing in gig transportation areas, right? And Julie's question about how to, make it available for people to bike and walk more from those areas. I mean, this is what we're talking about. And so that's pretty exciting to see that level of interest in creating this broader family-friendly network. So where do we go from here? The Utah Trail Network, as mentioned in the meeting, this is sort of the steps that they were undertaking, but developing the potential trail list, well, with all the input that we worked with you all on, right? They've done that. They have a potential list. They're looking to program pretty soon here, and they're going to be reaching out to communities to talk about trails that were mentioned in these meetings, and they're going to start ranking those projects using their Transportation Investment Fund active prioritization model. And so that's happening now through February of this upcoming year. And then really they have, again, a programming schedule that will take to the Transportation Commission for funding, and that funding will be available pretty much more or less immediately once these projects are selected by the Transportation Commission in March of 24. So really moving along those lines, which is exciting. And right, further efforts on the Beehive Bikeways, really working on synthesizing all of this data that you gave us and coming up with a cohesive vision of what that looks like, and expect that to happen over this wintertime period, and then reach back out to you all to see what corridors people can partner on and we can bring you all together on. I think that'll happen, spring, summertime. Again, thinking about what UTN ends up happening and how we can dovetail and work with UDOT on this stuff to create the comprehensive network, and then developing implementation resources for the Beehive Bikeways, which will happen sort of summer, fall. I hope to flesh that out with all of you as well. So again, thank you for your participation. This is exciting for me anyway. I really love this stuff and be able to try and improve our transportation system for more people and give them more options to get around. So I think with that, Samantha, good, unless there's any questions from folks.
Thanks, Hugh. It's really cool to see the lines we were drawing on those maps represented on that graphic and those gold stars. I mostly put the gold stars on myself for showing up, so I see that was not represented on the visual, but the workshop was a great opportunity to hear about these initiatives and get to coordinate a little bit as communities. I wonder if a community on today's call maybe has questions about either the Utah Trail Network or the Beehive Bikeways that they might want to sort of talk through before y'all reach out to them. Would it be okay if they reached out to you to ask those questions, Hugh?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, doors always open, so to speak. Love to hear from you. And yeah, we're in the thick of this, so happy to speak about it with anybody anytime.
Great. I wonder, Hugh, if you would put your email in the chat for anyone who maybe doesn't have it. And I'll just, while we're talking about the chat, mention again, if you popped in after we did introductions, if you would be so kind as to put your name and either your community or your organization in the chat box so that we have it for the minutes, that would be great. I think, Ted, we should turn it over to you, and then maybe we can kind of do questions about Hugh's information and yours after you wrap up.
That sounds great. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Well, I'll share it here in just a second. Kind of building off of what Hugh talked about, we are in the midst of making a game plan for how we all proceed together in coordinated regional planning. Of course, focusing on transportation, but as we know, that interacts a lot with land use and economic development activities. So we, as you know, we operate on this 4-year planning cycle. We just finished with an adoption of the Regional Transportation Plan and the Wasatch Choice Vision just in last May. And so this is a great time for us to think about, well, where do we want to go together? I'm about to share with you a high-level document with some draft objectives for things that we've been hearing from partners, from communities, from some of you. Hey, here are some ideas to explore. And the idea here today is I want to share these with you, get some initial comment verbally and in the chat. And if some of you want to, chat more in depth about this, we'd love it. And I will also note that this will be a conversation that we have for a couple or 3 months as we work out our 4-year game plan. And that will include a meeting that we call the Wasatch Choice Partners meeting. Here is the document. So I will talk through this here for just a minute. I hope you're seeing this. It says Wasatch Choice Vision 2027 to 2050, objectives, an initial draft. There are only 5 items here. I'll mention each one. Please jump in with your questions, and then I will open it up for some comment, turning to our chair to facilitate that conversation. First of all, some of you might be like, really? But we want to revise the overall Wasatch Choice framework. That is the story of both transportation plan together with a land use vision that comes from the grassroots, from communities. And you might ask yourself, you might be thinking, well, why do you want to do that? And the main reason is that if you were to poll city councilors from across the broader metro area, how many of them were involved in the development of Wasatch Choice? Not that many would raise their hands because we didn't together develop that center's framework. It's been about 8 years and city council's turnover. So that's the concept for number 1. Now, finer points on number 1. Julie mentioned the Wasatch Choice Great Streets. We want to drill down into how can we improve the fit between street design and function and the kinds of places that you want to create, notably in your Wasatch Choice centers. We'd like to together enhance our vision for parks and public spaces. C, we want to have a more focused conversation on implementation of centers as we refine the details of the transportation plan. Let's help them fit together better. So that's item 1. Item 2, it kind of relates to it. Hugh mentioned the Beehive Bikeways. One basic way to think of Beehive Bikeways is let's together elevate our expectation for the kind of transportation system we want to work towards together. The word is vision, that we have a stronger vision for all modes, roads, transit, and active transportation. What's the ultimate kind of network that we want to build? And then let's work to have a doable, achievable game plan for the transportation plan that pivots off of that vision. And the Beehive Bikeways is a really good example of that. 3, many of you know, we really launched a meaningful exploration of external forces, things that we can't control. That's what we mean by external. Climate change, economic swings, COVID-19, technological adoption, connected and autonomous vehicles. We want to further explore that. What does it mean for us collectively, local governments, transportation? How do we address it? What are those policies? That's 3. Number 4, we're focusing on what are things that we can do to improve our public and stakeholder process. 2 quick examples. I think we need clearer openings for public input into our transportation planning process. We also continue to want to better address the wants and needs of our more vulnerable population, equity considerations. That's 4. And 5, looking at how do we address some key issue areas a little bit better? Water, access to opportunities, how what we do helps connect people to the destinations that they want to get to. Induce demand. You know, sometimes when we build a major road, it doesn't solve congestion in the way we thought it does. Can we be more sophisticated in the way we proactively address induced demand? So there's 5. This is not exhaustive. More will come. This is trying to give kind of a medium level of detail, but I'll blessedly stop talking and open it up for some initial comments, questions, things we don't have on the list and we ought to have on the list. This is kind of, I would treat this list as these are enhancements to our ongoing process. So everything that you're used to us doing, we would continue to do, and these might be things that we add on top that relate to it. So Samantha, I'll hand it back to you to facilitate our conversation.
Sure. Yeah. Does anybody have initial questions or kind of gut reactions to this first draft that we're seeing? Feel free to either unmute and just dive right in, or if you want to raise your, virtual hand, I can call on you. Just clicking through here. I did have a question, Ted. I was wondering if I always have a question. If you could remind us, maybe for those who are newer to these calls or who weren't as involved with the last visioning process, if you could kind of give an overall summary, I guess, of how this type of plan affects communities in the work they do. How does it relate to their own planning processes? How can they maybe use the Wasatch Choice vision in the work they're doing? I think sometimes the scale of what's done at the regional level can feel like a little bit confusing with how it nests into work at the local level. So how would you explain maybe the Wasatch Choice vision for affecting communities' work?
That is a perfect question. Thank you. And if you have something different in mind based on my answer, please redirect. But the Wasatch Choice vision is, I explain it to people that it is the story of what communities have said, this is where we want to go. These are ideas we want to explore as we update our general plans. And then in turn, as we implement those general plans. And so I think the first thing to note is this is your vision. And if you as a community in your conversations, you don't feel like it reflects where you want to go, let's change it. That's point 1. But it is an agreement among friends that, hey, this is where we want to go as a community. This is where we want to focus growth. This is where we want to create great places. And dear transportation agencies, including UDOT and UTA, state funding, et cetera, we'd like you to help make that happen with your transportation infrastructure. Based on that, there's actually an expectation that it's implemented. It's not just a vision to be set on a shelf. The notion is you put it on the vision map and then we work towards it. And if you don't want to explore implementation, it's okay. Let's take it off the map, frankly. So I think that's the way you ought to think about Wasatch Choice is let's move forward together, implementing piece by piece. And then the other component, the last thing I'll say on this question is the notion of agreeing on a vision is let's work towards helping this happen together. We have resources. We have real money for infrastructure that we program. We have transportation land use connection to help you fund your planning needs. And I think increasingly, even some state interests are looking at, well, how do we help incentivize, hopefully they're working on incentives as the focus. How do we incentivize and help make our collective vision occur, come to fruition, acknowledging the fact that, you know, we can't really control how fast or how much we grow, but we can control how growth unfolds over time. Was that kind of in the space you were at, Samantha?
Yeah, that was great. It's, you know, what I'm hearing is that it's a tool that can be used on multiple levels, where you it clues you in at a conceptual level to what other communities in the Wasatch Front are planning, and it gives you kind of an insight of what they have in mind, which is extremely valuable since our communities all connect. And then also it's not just a conceptual tool, but a very practical tool where you can refer to this plan in grant funding requests and other implementation efforts. So it seems like it's a useful and valuable thing to be engaged in, both for kind of the conceptual planning part and the logistic steps. Does anybody else have questions or comments? I see that Becca from Salt Lake City added kind of a helpful point of feedback about their relationship with this planning effort. So appreciate you sharing that, Becca, as kind of a testament to the value of this effort. I think without further ado, then let's shift on to item 4, a legislative preview. I can't believe it's already almost legislative session time. Miranda, would you walk us through that preview?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Yeah, I can't believe it's time either, but it comes quickly every single year. So looking forward to sharing a little bit about what we can expect in this this next legislative session. Things are gearing up really quickly. It's that time of year where the governor is releasing his budget recommendations, where I actually think we're about 6 weeks away from session. And so things are heating up. Want to note that the session dates for this year are January 16th through March 1st. So we're barely tipping into March. It makes me feel a little bit better that it's only one day in March. It makes me feel like it's going a little bit quicker. But I kind of want to start out giving a little bit of context in kind of like what's the legislative landscape that we're kind of wading into this year. And I'll start by saying that we're coming off of several years of significant investment in multimodal transportation. Over the past, 3-ish years or so, the legislature has invested billions and billions of dollars in transportation. That, you'll see that with funding for the double tracking of Front Runner. That was a big thing a few years ago. Last year with the one-time and ongoing investment into trails with the Active Transportation Investment Fund and the Utah Trail Network that Hugh talked about. And so there's been a lot of focus and a lot of support for transportation over the past several years. And while I don't know that will change exactly, there are a few factors that might change the dynamic going into session. One of those things is that we're likely going to see, and this has been this was shared yesterday by the state's Executive Appropriations Committee. We're going to see a lot less funding than we have in years past. So last year, the legislature had, I think the numbers were like 3.2 billion in one-time revenue and 2.5 billion in ongoing revenue to work with and appropriate during the session. This year, they're looking at $133 million in one-time surplus and $500 million in ongoing money. So what they're working with is a lot less than what they've had before. The state is still doing fine. I mean, I wouldn't say that they're overly concerned, but they did mention yesterday that these are more moderate and like sustainable growth patterns for the state's revenue, whereas years past that wasn't sustainable, right? So that will impact how and what things will be appropriated this year. Also want to note that there is new House leadership. So Representative Mike Schultz is now Speaker of the House and has replaced Speaker Brad Wilson. and other leadership changes have changed as well. I will note that Speaker Schultz has been a wonderful advocate or champion for transportation investments over the past few years, and so we will hope he'll continue to do the same in his new tenure as Speaker. Third is that, and many of you are very aware of this, that the focus right now in the legislature, locally, kind of everywhere, it's on housing, right? Housing affordability, housing availability. And that was very clear and very evident in the governor's budget recommendations, which were released, which I'll get into some of those recommended proposals. And then lastly, and very excitedly, the Olympics, right? I'm calling this the 2034 fever because everyone is so excited, and rightfully so. And I I think that this single the single event that's coming up in 10 years is really going to shift and shape the way that we're looking at, and that lawmakers are looking at investments, whether that's transportation, whether that's transit, and to make sure that they're prepared to welcome the world to Salt Lake City in 2034. And so I think that really will start to play a key role moving forward. So a few quick hits from the governor's budget. This first little chunk or section that I've got here highlights some transportation investments. Again, the budget was a little bit more transportation light compared to housing. The governor's budget focus was on housing and homelessness. But to hit a few that are really great and critical, the first one is additional ongoing funding for transit investment statewide through the Transit Transportation Investment Fund, or the TTIF. So the recommendation here is 1% of the state's sales tax for the TIF going now to the Transit Transportation Investments Fund. So that's estimated to be about $45 million annually that if the legislature was supportive of this proposal, would go into the TTIF for general public transit projects. Second, the governor included a recommendation for transit innovation grants. These would be grants for local communities where they would have a match requirement associated with it to enhance existing transit service or provide transit service where there may not be some currently. So examples of this could be like K-12 transit pass programs, or shuttle service to high areas where there's centered areas, things like that. So not a lot of money for that. This was a recommendation that also came out of the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission at a much higher amount of $25 million, but the governor did include it here. And we'll see how that kind of shakes out. Additionally, there is a recommendation for advanced air mobility funding to go to UDOT to further study this issue, and to have an office in UDOT for advanced air mobility. The rest of the recommendations that I've listed here, again, are mainly focused around housing, mainly attainable housing. The governor has an initiative called Utah First Homes. The idea here is to help get more first-time home buyers in the market, because right now the median home price is not affordable for, I think it's about 75 or 80% of most Utahns. And so the idea here is a series of grants or different initiatives to help make that housing more attainable and more affordable for starter homes and for first-time home buyers. There's a few additional things in here: money for homelessness, money for recreation and open space, for water. There's a small appropriation for market capacity analysis. This also came out of the UEOC to look at where density can and should go what type of infrastructure is there to support that, and how much density can these areas of infill or greenfield ultimately support. And so that would be for a study to analyze that. So those are some of the broad highlights. Happy to answer any questions about those if you have them. Just really want to touch on the resources that WFRC has available during legislative session, some of the work that we're doing up on Hill to make sure that you are all informed and aware of what's going on. This is our government affairs webpage. That's under the public involvement tab on our website, where you can find our 2024 bill tracker. There's not too much there right now, just because the bills aren't really out, and we don't have a ton of bill language. But once session kicks up and those bills are released, that will be a little bit more robust and populated. We have our appropriations tracker. This will include appropriations like in the governor's budget, those recommendations, anything that the legislators are requesting, and kind of track throughout the funding process if things are being funded or approved or ranked by various appropriations committees. And so you can kind of check in real time to see where certain appropriations are at. And then lastly, during the session, and even just this morning, I sent out a government affairs email to share what was in the governor's budget. And during session, I'll be sharing kind of what's happening up on Capitol Hill, what's the latest with some of the key legislation and appropriations that we're watching. And so if you haven't subscribed and would like to, we have our government affairs email list for you to join. So ultimately, we're really looking forward to this upcoming legislative session. It will be a great session. We're excited for it. So happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Great. Thank you so much, Miranda. I put in the chat the link to that governmental affairs page. It's such an excellent resource. And I'm so glad you shared that, because one of the questions I anticipated asking was, how do you recommend people engage with the session? I think it's very daunting for those of us who maybe are wearing multiple hats and don't have the bandwidth to be super plugged in. And so providing that webpage with resources kind of ready to go, I think is such a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Does anybody have, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Samantha, to your point, like, how do you engage? I mean, one thing that's super helpful on our end is like hearing from you all if there are issues, right? And raising things to us saying like, hey, I'm not quite sure about what's going on with this bill, or, we have concerns. A lot of your cities have, well, several of your cities will have like government affairs folks, but a lot of yours don't. And so hearing from you all directly, if there's something that you're concerned about with something that you're seeing, feel free to funnel that up and share that with me or with anyone else on the team. And it's really helpful because we're all a team in some ways for transportation and our local issues.
Yes, thank you so much for that generous offer. I see that your contact information is on that webpage if people need it. And then I also am seeing, just as kind of a little plug for the website, legislative session wrap-ups from years past. So we know that once the session ends, it doesn't stop impacting us. We're all probably working on things that have been approved or passed in past sessions. So I think that's a good reminder too, that if you have questions maybe about items from past sessions, there's a section there that gives a wrap-up. Does anybody have any questions for Miranda about the session at this point?
I just have a quick question, Miranda. So just maybe you can explain your interaction with the league, and particularly as it relates to bill tracking, because I know the league also does a bill tracker. And so if you guys are doing your own independent, or if you guys work together, or just how that works.
Absolutely. Thanks, Steve. That's a really good question. So we do have our own independent bill tracker. The league does have their bill tracker as well. I will say that we are often we're coordinating with the league frequently throughout the session, and it's often that we would probably share similar bill positions to the league, because our bill positions come from our council members who will weigh in and say, hey, I think we should support or oppose or be neutral on these bills. And having that the local voice made up of our members to often is similar to maybe what the league would have because the issues are impacting us similarly, but again they are different. I also will note that the league gets to their positions through their legislative policy committee, or LPC, which they host on Mondays during the legislative session. And so you know, we're not only working in coordination just with the league, but also with our partners at the Utah Association of Counties, different chambers of commerce, our partners at UDOT and UTA. And so really it's a collective group of us who are all kind of helping each other and kind of make it through the session in some ways, but really weighing in on these issues together. And so yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Steve.
It did. Thank you.
And I added that the league's tracker also to the chat. It looks like it still has information from the last session, but I imagine the URL will probably stay the same and they'll update it for 2024. So if you have not already used that tool, that is another great mainstay of tracking the session. Great. Well, thank you so much, Miranda, for sharing that. I know it'll be here before we know it, and we'll probably all be reaching out with questions. And our next meeting in February will be mid-session, so we look forward to maybe hearing some updates about what we're looking at that time. Let's go ahead and move on to item number 5. This is a discussion on a new kind of tool, the urban design machine learning. I'm looking forward to hearing about this. And I know Brent is on the call. Brent, can we kick it over to you for kind of a 15-minute overview?
You bet. All right. Thank you very much. I also have a colleague, Valerie Novak, who's on Zoom with us. So my name is Brent Chamberlain. I am going to start out this talk actually with a video. This is part of a project that was funded by the National Science Foundation. And one of the pieces they had us do was a sort of a marketing promotional video. And since it's so succinct, we'll start with that. It's about 4 minutes, and then I'll follow up kind of with where we're going with this and sort of the ask. Hi, my name is Brent Chamberlain. I'm an associate professor at Utah State University and the principal investigator for our team, Universal Pathways. Nearly 30 million working-age Americans live with disabilities and face significant challenges accessing employment due to the lack of transportation infrastructure. Despite efforts to improve these conditions, inadequate knowledge of infrastructural issues have led to communities facing hundreds of millions of dollars in lawsuits. At Universal Pathways, we believe good data about the accessibility of public transit, crosswalks, sidewalks, and public rights-of-way is essential for building thriving communities. Good data leads to more informed planning strategies. Better strategies increase equitable access to employment, better public health and safety, and reduces the likelihood for legal action. Our solutions can help communities prioritize infrastructural decisions to improve access to places of employment. At Universal Pathways, a distinguished team of computer science researchers, human service professionals, and community planning experts join forces to develop cutting-edge urban analytics. Our team consists of individuals from nationally recognized institutions throughout the U.S., spanning expertise across 7 distinct disciplines. Collectively, our team has worked with dozens of communities locally and throughout the world to improve infrastructure planning. Together, we have received several millions of dollars in funding for our research and efforts. Our approach leverages state-of-the-art computer vision and machine learning. This approach is improved by working people living with disabilities who provide essential validation and quality control reviews. Our prototype currently detects transit stop and sidewalk infrastructure with high accuracy. Our prototype has been built to be extremely scalable and expandable to a range of different locations throughout the US, and we can detect a range of elements to facilitate transportation, movement, and planning. Our techniques will be easy to deploy anywhere that imagery, such as Google Street View, exists. These techniques do not require expensive aerial or LiDAR imagery, painstaking crowdsourcing, or extensive on-site manual inventories. Our final data are packaged into easy-to-use geographic data sets. Further, we can provide analytics that incorporate demographic and other built environment variables important for community planners.
An online inventory tool would have been so beneficial as a planner when conducting the stop inventory and checking for accessibility. This type of tool would make it easier to analyze and share data resources to help with improvements to make locations more accessible in a timely manner.
Over 80% of communities do not have an ADA transition plan mandated by the federal government, and so the pressure to deliver is increasing. Universal Pathways provides rapid and cost-efficient solutions to build ADA transition plans. Urban centers will clearly benefit from our approach, but ours is the first to be highly scalable to suburban and rural communities where these data are normally cost-prohibitive to maintain. Planners are not the only professionals who can benefit from partnering with Universal Pathways. Transportation agencies, developers, service professionals, and mobility managers are among many of the professions that can use data provided and monitored by Universal Pathways. At Universal Pathways, we are motivated to improve independence, access to employment, and social integration. People with disabilities deserve to thrive in our communities. By partnering with Universal Pathways, you can help create safer, more accessible transportation while simultaneously mitigating non-compliance costs. Join us in supporting Universal Pathways. Together, let's build a better future, connected and inclusive mobility networks for all.
Awesome. I should just keep the music going while I'm talking. It'll make it sound more interesting. So that video was put to give you an idea of the prototype that we've been developing. I teach in environmental planning and landscape architecture here at Utah State, and we collaborate with a number of folks across computer science disciplines, disability disciplines, within our own university and others. And one of the things we really focus on are data, because this is one of the more important pieces for conducting planning. So I just wanted to give you all an idea of the kind of data we've now been able to collect since that video was put out a few months ago. What we're using is Google Street View imagery, as well as other sort of images that have been crowdsourced that are available publicly. And we can automatically identify and detect different infrastructure, like you're seeing here, marked crosswalks or textured curb ramps, even curb ramps in general, whether they exist or not, different types of pedestrian signals, and then a whole range of other multi-mobility kinds of characteristics here. On the right, what you're seeing is the accuracy with which we've been able to detect these features. So to think through this concept, if there are hundreds and in some cities even thousands of different types of infrastructure, you have to train and continuously update and collect this information that exists. And as an alternative, we're able to provide sort of this first pass AI approach. And you can see the accuracy of this detection is quite high just using Google Street View imagery. I wanted to jump in here with a poll. We'll post it in the, I'll post the link here. Let me get it started. All right.
Sorry, Brent, I was supposed to have that and I forgot.
Oh, that's okay. Can you post it?
Yeah, I will do it right now.
Okay. So for those who are interested, just go to menti.com and then you can punch in this code, or Valerie's going to stick in chat.
It should be in the chat now.
Okay, great.
Brenda, is this what you're seeing? Is that matching up with, like, as you've been talking to communities,
This is everybody here.
Data?
No, sorry.
I mean, but like, as you've been trying to find data at other communities, I know we've been working on parking data. Is this sort of matching up with what you've been seeing as you've been trying to find community data?
For the 12 people who responded, no. I mean, most towns and communities don't even have sidewalk data. And certainly if they have some, it's usually not comprehensive. There really isn't good data on whether crosswalks exist We don't have information on the quality of sidewalks. So that's one of the other things that our partners have really worked on, is identifying where, there are major lifts in or cracks or otherwise within sidewalks themselves. So those kind of data are typically things where somebody falls and calls the city, or some other, person addresses this issue and reaches out to somebody. But the kind of the asset tracking itself, whether something is ADA compliant or not, we do not tend to see those data across the US. And even within Utah, it's pretty limiting, actually. Okay, great. I'll bump that off and we'll continue with another one. So one of the things we highlighted in the video and want to talk about here are transition plans. And I hope most of you are familiar with it, but if not, just to give you some concept. Transition plans are required for public serving entities that have more than 50 employees, so cities in particular. And these have actually been out for 3 decades, but very few communities in the US actually have a specific transition plan. So just some of the elements of what those contain. So the first step is the identification of physical obstacles, right? Where are the particular obstacles that limit accessibility? And that includes from pedestrian and the transfers between intersections. So I can tell you from a GIS standpoint, if I went out to go get a transportation network, I can get that for roads just fine, but I can't get that for pedestrian transit. You might have sidewalks, but are they connected to crosswalks that are connected to obstacles and so on and so forth to identify what kind of physical obstacles exist, let alone things like, trash cans or temporary construction or other kinds of stuff that exists in here. Transition plans are more focused on these, the more well-established and long-term kinds of physical obstacles. But then it goes into like the type of methods that communities will use to make different facilities available. Our original focus by NSF was towards employment, but this is actually a much broader issue that our work can apply to. And then it's about scheduling. So what are you going to do in the future, which obviously implies what kind of funding are you looking towards this, and then who is particularly responsible for it. So the plan itself is not that you're going to resolve all issues immediately, but the first step is really to identify the kind of data that you need so that we can see where those obstacles exist. The ADA Act, I'm just going to put some notes here. I'll talk through this quick. One of the things that's really important here when communities don't have transition plans and are not compliant is that we see broad scale discrimination that can lead to lawsuits and denial of federal funding. A lot of places have tended to avoid doing this, to say, if the data aren't there, we're not going to get, the lawsuit is a lot harder to deal with. If you jump down 2 bullets to the bold one, in August 2023, like within a few months, there was a new adoption of the Pedestrian Rights of Way Accessibility Guide, the PROAG standards. I would highly recommend you look that up. They're basically, this hasn't really been updated for a decade, and this is kind of one of the first solidified guidelines and standards that is put forward by the U.S. Access Board, so the highest board on federal laws and regulations around accessibility for pedestrian rights of way. And there is increasing pressure for communities to do this and not just avoid, not having data to facilitate this conversation, but actually addressing these issues that go forward. But not only with non-compliance, most of you are all aware of the bipartisan infrastructure investment jobs. And in order to get additional funding related to these kinds of infrastructure, a transition plan really helps to facilitate access to that funding. Okay, so we have another question on here. We're curious of those that are on here, if you know if your community has an ADA transition plan.
As people are coming back and almost 90% are saying no, Ted or anyone from TLC, can TLC funds be used to help communities create an ADA transition plan?
Are you, sorry, were you asking me, Julie?
So that's a question I'm asking WFRC staff on the call.
Yeah, okay, that was checking. I was
I'm
like,
wondering if we have
Why don't-
resources that can help the 13 communities that have said that they
I think
can't.
why don't we leave that as maybe for now? I don't know how expensive that is. I don't know. I think we've been getting at it some, but I don't know to what extent that transition plan then in turn helps enable more people to travel by walk or bike. I assume yes, but it's those kinds of questions of costs and other modal benefits that would be evaluated in the process of making a TLC decision. So I think maybe.
Brent, if
And
the community is interested in partnering with you and with this tool to look into that, is that something you're kind of looking for communities to
yes,
collaborate?
that's the next slide. So, I mean, the statistic we're seeing here is pretty common. So I'll skip through some of these things. I think just to hit actually the first point mentioned about funding and broader walkability. So the kind of process that we work with here originally is focused on some of the infrastructure for disabilities, but there are other elements that could be included, like identifying sharrows or bike pane lines or bike lanes or those sorts of things that we can automate in terms of some of the data collection. So you see here a whole range, like active transit, walkability. The safe routes to school is also important because we need networks to identify what's safe. I mean, personally, I've seen a number of kids fall off their scooters or on their bikes because they're trying to go over, intersections that don't have any curb ramps or really bad quality of sidewalks and those sorts of things. And we have good data in my neighborhood. So there are other ranges and things that we can talk about where there might be some, mutual benefits, where there may be funding for more of the active transportation that we can work on while simultaneously addressing some of the ADA things. We're interested in this. I've got a little survey here I'll put up in just a sec. So, there are federal grant funding that we can apply to as a institution, higher ed institution. But there are also other kind of grants and matching. We're talking with UDOT and UTRAC to see what kind of funding we can get to continue some of this work. But there are other funds that you all may know of or have access to that we could look at, whether that's like direct or in kind or other sort of support funding that we can partner with that. So I'm happy to take questions, but I'd like to, let me see if I can just copy this link and I can post it in here. It's just a really short survey just to get name and otherwise. So if you're interested in reaching out to us, please put your information in there. We'll be happy to send a note. Valerie or myself can do that. And if you have ideas of ways that we could, look at funding or whether you'd be interested in helping support that. I think one of the things I've talked to Julie about this project and some others at WFRC. We had applied for another round of NSF funding. It was highly competitive. They gave 4 projects around the country. So I don't think we've gotten that second round of funding. So we're trying to see what we can do within a homegrown solution. And if any sort of ways we can get some sort of scale economy, that is actually really effective with some of the AI techniques. We can do that quite quickly. We just need to get to that initial phase.
Thank you for sharing that URL. And I think maybe that's something, that contact form survey is something we could send out to the group after the meeting, so that, because I know sometimes it goes into the meeting chat and then it disappears and people are like, oh, I wanted to do that. So I think we can probably coordinate to send that out after the fact. Maybe just a few quick questions if anyone has them. We have a few more things to hit before we wrap up, but does anyone have burning questions right now for Brent or Valerie? I wonder, Brent, if you would also leave your contact information in the chat so that people can reach out. I know I have some questions that I'll be reaching out to you offline to talk through. It's very exciting to see some practical applications with AI and the work we do. So I appreciate you being willing to share this.
Of course. Thank you all. I appreciate the time too.
Great. Let's wrap up here with kind of the rest of our agenda. Julie, would you take us through a quick overview of the Utah Parking Modernization Guide? You already are. There it is. Oh, it looks like you're muted.
Okay, there goes all of the time benefit that I got from showing this early. Okay, So yeah, we're back at you with the Utah Parking Modernization Guide. Hopefully you saw a presentation about it either at the League of Cities and Towns or the APA Fall Conference. But this time, yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone that we have this guidebook. It was released back in October, and encourage you to talk with your city, the rest of your city staff, your elected officials, and use the guidebook to help work through some modernization of your parking standards. So one thing that's been really helpful or popular in Utah is multi-level marketing. And so I'm going to take a page out of the handbook of Young Living and ask you guys to join our community. I think that even though this is exactly what they say on their website, it works in this context too. There's never been a better time for you to take your own future into your hands. No matter your goal, we want you to know that's possible, especially related to parking. And so we are here to help. We have 3 steps to help get you started on this journey. One is that we're happy to help present to your planning commission or city council, get the conversation started with them. We also have technical assistance through our ordinance assistance and auditing program. If you're not ready to take that big leap and become a full-fledged member of our parking MLM, we can at least help you work through what gaps there might be in your parking ordinance or places that might be places that could be updated. And then finally, we have TLC funding that can help you work through and update your code. So there's 3 great ways, depending on what level you want to come join us in parking modernization. I also wanted to mention next year, 2024, parking like you've never seen it before. This one doesn't really rhyme. It's the year to modern or improve your city's core. So we are going to help you do that through some technical trainings. We have some webinars lined up, some parking mobile tours that we're organizing with the League of Cities and Towns. Those are going to be more fun than they sound because it sounds like we're just walking through a parking lot. But they're going to be better than that. And then we're happy, obviously, to help you with trainings with your planning commission, city council. And then we're asking also, we want to help information share. So if your community has already modernized your parking or changed your parking code, updated it, please share that with us so that we can share that with others as well. And then last but not least, this year we're going to end on a bang. We're having an upcoming webinar called Parking 2.0. It's aimed towards your elected officials, your mayors, your city councilors. It's a conversation between Ted and myself and Mayor Shepherd from Clearfield, getting the webinar series started. So we'll be talking about ways that Clearfield has helped or updated their parking and some benefits that they've been seeing there. So that's my short little parking spiel. Samantha.
I wonder if I join your group, can I be my own boss and can I work from the comfort of my own home?
You can be your own boss. You can work from the comfort of your home. You can increase your city's tax revenue through redevelopment. There's lots of great things that can be accomplished.
This is very compelling. I may fall into this trap. I think this is great information. I hope that we get to see a lot of you at this webinar. Is there registration for the webinar, Julie?
Yeah, that is a great thing to ask. We are sending out, it should have been in our newsletter, and sending out a separate kind of email blast about the parking. I don't have the link to sign up. I don't know, Ted, if you have it, but if you're subscribed to our newsletters, it should be in that.
I'll try to find it as soon as I can, and we'll send it out at least by email. And if you don't mind, I'll just say one more thing about the webinar, which is that, hey, addressing parking is politically often dicey. And hey, we know that. And that's part of the idea of having a conversation with Mayor Shepherd. Here's my point. You might want to share this if you're interested in with your city council and with your planning commission. Those people that are often trying to balance a policy shift with politics, this is a great group for them. So thanks.
Thank you so much. And I noticed that Becca added a question into the chat. In the interest of time to just wrap up, I wonder, Julie, if you would be willing to help Becca with that question in the chat or offline.
And Samantha, can I just make a quick comment?
Of course, sure.
So one of my concerns on parking, and I'll just got quite a bit of experience in this, is I think sometimes we plan for what we would like, but sometimes ignore reality. So just what I mean by that, I'm looking right now at census data where a third of households in Utah have 3 or more cars, right? So my concern is we even have developments in our city where people are trying to find ways of adding more parking because they don't have enough, right? And so I'm just a caution. I think sometimes we go a little far to the extreme and end up having projects that don't have enough parking and a lot of problems as a result. So just putting in my 2 cents.
Appreciate that perspective, and I imagine we'll hear more at the webinar about maybe ways to strategize the parking you do have to make it work for a multitude of projects and uses. So we'll look forward to hearing more from the WFRC team on that. I am going to just collapse item 7 about the townhome discussion into kind of a tee up for February. We weren't sure if we'd be able to get this item on the agenda today, so I'll just mention it to keep in mind for February. We wanted to have a discussion about townhomes and about townhome proposals and projects you're seeing in your communities. We know that they're a great way to add more housing units, but we also know sometimes the proposals come in really fast and maybe aren't super well suited to the context right around them, or the long range plans that the city has or the community has for its future. So we would love for you to do some thinking on the townhome projects in your communities and maybe share what's worked well, what hasn't, and we'll plan to talk about that more in February. Jory, I know you have an item for other business. I think I'll just mention really quick the things on there under A, B, and C, and then I'll turn it over to you. The September TAC follow-up, what I wanted to mention there is that we heard from the Department of Natural Resources, specifically the Division of Water Resources, about some assistance for adding the water elements to your general plans. And I just wanted to reshare the contact information for those folks. If you have questions and want to reach out to them, I've dropped that in the chat. And then wanted to note for future topics, I'm going to be sending out kind of a survey to assess the topics this group is interested in for the new year to make sure we're providing value for everyone on the call about what you want to discuss. And our next meeting will be in February. Voice is starting to go. That's a sign I've been talking too much. And I'll be reaching out to find kind of a community highlight volunteer. So Jory, with 2 minutes to spare, let's go ahead and cover your item.
Just quickly, I put in the chat, the WFRC, we've assembled a region-wide map layer of all the general plans data in 2020. We're going to look to update that here next year. So look for us to come out. We utilize this data. It influences our real estate market model, which helps us project population and employment into the traffic analysis zones as part of our forecast. So gear up for that. Look at this map, get familiar with it, and be prepared to provide us any updates this following year.
Great. Thank you so much, Jory, for sharing that. Okay, that brings us right to our time and right to item number 9. I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Motion by Vendelin. Do you have a second?
Second. And I must say, Samantha, you run a tight ship.
I do run a tight ship. I appreciate everyone's patience with me and if I cut you off. Motion by Vendelin, second by Mike Malloy, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I don't think we even need to do that maybe on adjournment. I think we can note that stands as adjourned. We'll see you all in February, and thank you for taking time to be with us this morning. Happy holidays.
Thanks.
Thanks, Samantha. Bye.